leadership for profit or for purpose, which I think is very interesting, and that conceivably could inform part of our discussion this morning. Where do you see it?
Thank you, Jeremy. Pretty much my story about what leadership stands for is also a testimony of what I've gone through personally. And my take on your top 10 tips of leadership, the one that I think becomes critical, which talks to purpose, is about identifying talent and nurturing talent. It's all about succession, because I think the key thing is if a leader can't build capability around him or her for the leaders of the future, you have failed in your responsibility as a leader.
So it's about building capability, it's about building capacity. Let's move on if we can. Lebo, how do you see it? How do you go about building that capacity and that capability? It rolls nicely off the tongue, doesn't it? But it's something that I would imagine occupies the thoughts of any leader all the time.
Thanks, Jeremy. I think for me, unless we start early and we do very simple things well and give people from a very young age an opportunity to lead, they will not know what they are talking about when they say lead, and they will do what Leslie warned us about, of saying leadership is about a position. So I think for me, the greatest lessons I am learning about leadership is from 8 to 14-year-olds in South Africa who are part of our Somebody's Club movement, who on a daily basis are working together to make a difference in their lives. The kind of skills that they are learning by practicing in an environment sometimes that is harsh is what some people are paying a lot of money to go to university about. And unfortunately, I think at that time it's very late. You need to create on a daily basis an opportunity for people of all walks of life.
When you look for people as a leader, there are two things that you look for. I mean, you go and you look for technical competencies. You have to tick that box. People have to have the skills, the education, to be able to deliver and perform on the tasks at hand. But you also have to look at the behavioral competencies. And I think I just want to take this a step back, and I'm going to talk about the opportunities and affording people opportunities. For me, if you want to deal with the challenges that we have across broad society, whether it's private or public sector, we need to take it to the core, and it's about the values. What I firmly believe in is values-based leadership. We need to instill in the very young people that we're talking about the value of integrity.
There's a saying that I love, I'm going to read off my snide little machine here, which says leadership is the capacity to translate vision into a reality. Now, we always go on and on about this skills match between ourselves and the rest of the world, ourselves and where we feel we need to be, ourselves and where we feel we would like to be if we were not Nigerian, Kenyan, Egyptian, Brazilian, Chinese, Indian, and everything else that is not South African or African, in fact. And the strange thing about this is that we have the opportunity right now as South Africa at a very pivotal moment to redeem 20 years of achievement. We have an opportunity to look not only at what is not, but what is. And there's a story that I like to tell about a young woman whose family had very little, as is typically the case in these sorts of stories. And she saw an opportunity to collect garbage and to create a recycling plant. And she turned this into some kind of an opportunity. That didn't take an education, that didn't take a value system, that didn't take a mission and a vision and a strategic plan with a fancy overpaid consultant, such as some of us even. It just took her to seize the opportunity and to find the gap. Now, we can sit and pontificate about what it would take for us to get from the first place to the next place. But I'm strongly of the opinion that we are really in a golden era with a golden opportunity to redeem our leadership capacities in this country?
Leslie, I can't help but wonder if we grapple with issues of leadership because of a universal lack of confidence in this country. In many ways, we are victims of our own lack of self-esteem.
We had a conference a couple of weeks ago. There's a gentleman who's a member of Proud South Africa, and he comes from one of the Eastern European countries, no relationship to one another. Anyway, he made something he made a very powerful statement, and he said, why is it that you South Africans don't believe in yourself? Because we see so much potential in you that somehow you fail to realize. Now, quoting from the National Development Plan, Jeremy.
Which you have read in its entirety.
So it says, and I quote, it says, South Africa has the means, the goodwill, the people and the resources to eliminate poverty and reduce inequality. It is within our grasp, but it will not happen unless we write this new story. A story of the people, their relationship, their dreams and their hopes for a better tomorrow. We want our children and our young people to have a better life chances than we have. It also requires us to be humble, never pretending that we have a monopoly of wisdom. Let me quote, allow me please to quote from Amilcar Cabral. This is what he says. He says, hide nothing from the masses of our people. Expose lies when they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes and failures, and claim no easy victories. Because we have a tendency as South Africans of wanting to claim the easy victories. You know, one thing that really irritates me is when I go into a meeting and everybody talks about this low-hanging fruit. I want to find that tree and chop it, because it's a license to laziness. We are not prepared to do the hard things. And if you read the National Development Plan, we like the easy things, like paying grants. And we brag about the fact that we're paying grants to 60 million people, out of a population of 52 million people plus VAT. Now, if we have to dissect that, it literally means that over nearly half of your population relies on the state for their livelihood. That can never be sustained. I think it's an issue that requires leadership. One of the interesting questions that people often ask when it comes to leadership circles is, are leaders boring? My simple answer is, well, we wouldn't be talking about the leader in the board.
How profound that is. Simple but profound. Matilda, back to you. You wanted to respond.
Yeah, it's just something about the whole issue of acute skills shortage. It takes a real investment in an unorthodox approach. Because let me give you just two key examples of what I've done in my day job, so to say. We all know that the telecoms...
What's the other job?
We all know that the telecoms industry is quite young on its own. And unfortunately, we supposedly have an acute shortage of female telecoms engineers. In 2006, at Vodacom, I started a program which we called a graduate program for female in leadership in technology. The essence of it was to say, let us go and identify females who've got the potential to be trying to become telecoms engineers. I'm talking to you today, Jeremy. We've actually produced about 180 of them, of which 5 are in India, Germany, and the UK. And I'm talking of young black females who had never seen what telecoms engineering is all about. So took a risk, spent an investment into it, something that was never heard of. And interestingly, because I'm an HR, I can also tell you that we have never lost any of them that still in Vodacom as we speak today.
It starts with opportunity. You know, I think we undervalue the kind of skills that people do when they practice. And leadership is not about doing it right all the time. Leadership is also about giving an opportunity for people to fail. And I don't think that we appreciate fully when we develop leadership the place of failure. Everybody who starts a project wants everything to be successful. So the opportunities that you create is for people to learn by doing, to practice, and they will learn negotiation skills only when they argue and they have conflict. They will learn financial management only when they have limited resources and maybe they are not managing it effectively. And the way that you do it is you create opportunities, particularly for the most vulnerable.
Good point.
Of
As a manager, then, how should a manager be managing the failure of subordinates to make sure that the lessons we learnt and that something positive comes up.
I
Because
think-
managers themselves often say, well, you failed, okay, that's a black mark against you, let me do it myself.
I think every failure is a teachable moment. Every time you have a project and you delegate and you give people an opportunity to do it their own way, obviously within parameters, you give them an opportunity to have first-hand experience of how they are doing it. And by doing so, the feedback that you give in terms of the way that they have failed and they have dealt with it is what is going to bring the confidence that even if they did not get it right the first time.
How much
they will-
failure are you is allowed to happen before you have to move on?
I think it's context specific, but you need to be very upfront and forthright about the value of failure in a project.
I think if we were to move forward, and move forward on a strong foot as a nation, we need to take a deep look at ourselves. The Googles of this world, the Facebooks of this world, were not built strong from day one. The Mark Zuckerbergs of this world, they fell flat at some particular point in time.
Lenny told us not to use Google Maps.
So I think as leaders, we need to take a step back and say, within which reasonable bounds are we able to tolerate failure?
Okay, Paula, what are those reasonable bounds in your opinion? If you agree with the premise that we are generally intolerant of failure, I happen to agree with you.
It depends on the context. I mean, reasonable bounds if you're an aeronautical engineer and the flight crashes because of one mismaneuver and 500 people die. That is one thing. But I think, what is it that we're trying to achieve? What is it that we want? The first job that I ever had when I came out of varsity was I was supposed to be ushering some guy. It was a legal center, had a legal background at some stage in my life. And I ran away from it very fast. And it was basically this guy who was supposed to be training me up to do what he did. So Anyamela, after 2 days, he vanished, okay? And I was 22 years old, and I remember the head of the head of the firm. She came out and she said, "Miss Kweku," and I was like, looking for me? No, I'm like looking around, like how many Miss Kwekus are there in this organization? She's like, all these people are waiting for you. They need help. And she said something to me. She said, "You've got to act like you know." You've heard that, right? You've got to act like you know. They don't know you don't know. You've got to act like you know. She's like, "Via, when go, via." So I vied, and I spoke to these people one by one. The telephone is a wonderful instrument. This is 20 years ago, so there was no Google, the unreliable Google at the time. So I was phoning other companies and finding out what was needed. We shouldn't be afraid not to know. We shouldn't be afraid to say we don't know, but that should never be a reason not to do. And in that context, I was given the space to do, despite my very strong limitations. By the time the guy came back 6 months later, I really didn't need him much. Because I had such a strong support mechanism from the board, from this tough love boss of mine who just threw me in with the sharks, and she was like, "See to finish, sister." And I think that we need to be able to give each other that kind of space. I also think that we shouldn't be afraid of looking at things differently.
Failure is part of life. Just because you have failed does not make you a failure. Van Gogh sold in his lifetime, he sold one painting. One painting. Remember that NEC spoke about a painting? One painting. That's what Van Gogh sold. Albert Einstein was regarded as uneducatable. In simple terms, they said Tom. Mozart was told by Emperor Hirohito that his notes were too noisy. Steve Jobs, he dropped in and out of college until he discovered the importance of typography. And look what a great legacy is left behind. You can mention so many examples. The tolerance levels in South Africa for failure is very small. We literally cut people short. We don't tolerate failure. And the reality of life is that whether you want to admit it or not, you will fail. We all fail in one way or the other. We all have to confront and deal with failure. Now, there's a man called John Maxwell who wrote a very excellent book that I encourage you to read called Failing Forward. He says you fail forward when you take the lessons learned. And I think one of the things that we need very strongly as a response to this intolerance is mentoring. How many of us here have young people that we are mentoring to say, not this way, but that way? Because, you see, what the world needs is love. We all deserve a second chance.